Hey everybody, Charles from GMAT Ninja Tutoring here. Today we're going to talk about text completion questions on the GRE verbal section. So those are those nice little questions where you're going to get a sentence with one blank or two blanks or three blanks, and your job is to find the word or words that best fit in those blanks. So a lot of people think of these as vocabulary-based questions, and they are up to a certain point, but the key isn't necessarily whether you have the biggest vocabulary on earth. It's how you approach these questions is going to make a huge, huge difference in your score. So regardless of whether you have an incredible vocabulary or a pretty limited one, we want to make sure that you're doing everything humanly possible to get as many of these right as possible. And that's going to be our focus today. Quick plan for today. I'm going to talk about the structure of the verbal section, give you a little context on how important text completion questions are. Then we're going to give you a little bit of an overview on how to approach them, and then jump right into our first example. Nothing too super difficult to start with. Use that as a jumping off point to talk about how best to study for GRE vocab-based questions, which materials to use, and whether to study vocabulary. And then we'll give you one more example, a little bit harder than that first one. All right. Quick overview, GRE verbal section, the shortened version of the GRE that was just introduced. You got two sections. First section is going to be 12 questions. Second section is going to be 15. You add that up, you get 27 questions. About half are going to be reading comprehension. Little bit more than half are going to be vocabulary based. 7 text completion, 26% of your questions. And then another 7 are going to be sentence equivalents. We'll deal with those in another video, even though they're pretty similar to the text completion. Okay, here's the big thing I want you to keep in mind as we jump into this first example today. The real key to success on GRE text completion, yes, of course, a big vocabulary helps, but the more common mistakes we see from students is that they don't always pay attention, or at least not close enough attention to the context of the sentence. Think of GRE text completion questions as having 2 dimensions of difficulty. One is obviously, do you know the words, or do you know enough of the words and the answer choices to get the question right? The other is, are you paying really, really close attention to the context of the sentence? And that sounds really, really silly, but the mistake we see every single day tutoring GRE students is you'll pick a word that sounds good in the immediate surroundings of the sentence, or just jump straight to those answer choices and go, hey, which one of these sounds best? Please don't do that. That's how the GRE gets you on these guys. What I want you to do instead is really spend a little bit of extra time focusing on what exactly does a sentence mean? What is the significance of the blank? Is this blank echoing something else in the sentence? Is it supporting something? Is it contradicting something? I want you to be able to point to something in the sentence and say, the blank relates to this part over here, and here's how. Take those extra few minutes when you first look at a text completion question, and it is going to pay enormous dividends for you, I promise. And that sounds really, really silly, sounds really easy to do under time pressure. It really isn't. A lot of people's instincts kick back in and they just start blasting back through, lunging at the words. So the focus today, really concentrate on the context of that sentence before you jump in. All right. I'm going to know our first example in just a moment here. If you like these videos, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. It helps other people find the videos. If you really, really like these videos, GMAT Ninja Tutoring, we've been offering, even though GMAT isn't our name, we've been offering GRE tutoring for more than 20 years. If you need some one-on-one help, please reach out to us at gmatninja.com. And one of our big passions, we love putting out full free courses for free. So this is our entire free GRE verbal course. We have a GRE quant course available as well. If that's helping you out, if it's saving you money that you otherwise would have spent on a course, please donate to some of our favorite charities. Please pay that forward if you're so inclined and this is saving you money. All right, with that, let's jump into our first example, and we'll give you a couple minutes to take a look at this guy. Okay, as always, if you need a little bit more time, feel free to hit that pause button. For everybody else, let's talk through this one. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about the bad habits that we see all the time from our GRE students when they start tutoring with us. The temptation is to just start punching words in and say, oh, what would sound good here? And you kind of go through and maybe 2 or 3 of them sound good. Maybe only one of them sounds right to you. Please, please, please don't do that. Take a breath. Spend some time on the sentence itself before you move on to the answer choices. A lot of what they're going to do here, a lot of how they make these questions difficult, is that there are going to be answer choices here that sound just fine with the immediate surroundings of that blank. When you punch it in, it sounds perfectly good, but it doesn't actually make sense with the context. They're going to give you a bunch of hints in the sentence. They're very clear about what you're trying to say. They're not going to make that super opaque. It's your job to pay attention, take an extra moment on the sentence itself, figure out the function of that blank. What's it doing? What can you point to in the sentence that gives you an indication of what needs to go in that blank? And do all of that thinking before you jump in here. Okay, in parts of the Arctic, the land grades into the land-fast ice. I don't know who talks like that, but whatever, the GRE does. Into land-fast ice so blank that you can walk off the coast and not know that you're over the hidden sea. Okay, so we know that the land grades so something. What is the quality that the land grade has? We know that it has to be so something. Well, so something that what? That you don't know that you're over the hidden sea when you walk off it. So we need something there that's going to support the idea that the land is going to grade in such a way that we don't even know that we've switched from land to sea. So maybe this is something that it grades into land fast ice, so in a way that's so deceptive or hidden, or it's something that you can't notice, or it's unnoticeable, something like that, so that you're clueless that you're walking out over the ocean, or over the sea in this case. Okay, now notice that what I'm trying really hard not to do, and it's difficult to be perfect with this, is I'm not trying to completely anticipate what's the exact word. I'm trying to go, okay, what in general is this going to do? Again, how do they make these difficult? One dimension is maybe the words themselves are hard to understand. The second dimension is, are you paying attention to the context? Going to give you something that maybe sounds good in that blank, but doesn't make sense with the context, or something that's maybe just a little bit surprising. It makes sense with the context, but might not be the first thing you think of. So try not to anchor yourself too hard to a particular guess, because it probably isn't going to be there. Try to get yourself anchored to an idea. We have something we can point to in the sentence. We don't know that we're over the hidden sea once we walk off the land, because the land grades so gently in such a nuanced way, in a way that we can't quite notice, we can't quite see, something like that. Now, if you use that as your guide, these answer choices should be pretty easy to slice through as long as you know the words. All right. Permanently. Well, that doesn't make any sense. We're not saying anything about the land grading permanently into the ice. We're interested in the fact that we don't know that we're over the sea. So maybe a gentle grade to the land, nothing to do with permanence. That's out. Imperceptibly, I'm going to hang on to that one because that's exactly what we're talking about. We can't perceive that the land is grading downwards into the sea. So that's a contender. Let's hang on to it. Irregularly, well, that's not going to make sense. So if the land is grading in an irregular way up and down, how is that going to lead us to not knowing that we're over the sea? That really doesn't support that idea. So we can get rid of C. Precariously. Well, what does precarious mean? Precarious means something that's unstable, and that has nothing to do with it either. So if the land grades into the sea in an unstable way, I guess that would mean we're falling into the sea or something, or the land's not very stable. Nothing about that. The only thing we're trying to support here is that we don't know that we're over the sea. So we can eliminate D. And relentlessly, meaning that it's something that's constant, it's consistent, it's maybe strong in some way, it's unending. Sounds kind of tempting. And this is a really good example of an answer choice the GRE will give you that sounds really okay with the surroundings. The land grades into the land fast ice so relentlessly that you can walk off the coast and not know you're over the hidden sea. You kind of imagine yourself in this land that's grading downwards relentlessly and unendingly. But it doesn't have anything to do with this hint that they gave us in the sentence. We want something that tells us that we don't know we're over the hidden sea. Could the land grade relentlessly into the sea? Sure, but it has absolutely nothing to do with this idea that we don't know we're walking out over the sea. So very, very common feature here you're going to see over and over and over on text completion on the GRE sentence equivalents as well. Answer choice sounds good with the blank, sounds good with the immediate surroundings, but if you're really focused on your context, it just doesn't work. So ease out. Okay, now I deliberately chose a question. This is an official question, by the way. It does not appear in any of the practice tests. Everything we do in these GRE videos, we're not going to run any practice tests for you. Official questions that don't appear in the books, don't appear in the practice tests. So I tried to pick one here that doesn't have super, super hard vocabulary. Now, if you struggle a little bit with vocabulary, maybe it's possible you don't know some of these words, and I want to talk about that a little bit. I want you to be really, really disciplined about your process. Notice that I didn't say I love B and I move on. I'm not falling in love with B. I'm saying I'm going to keep it in there. Now, there's really only two things I want you to do with answer choices. Either you keep it or you cross it out. Keeping it might mean that you think it's the right answer. It might also mean you have no idea what that word meant. So for example, if I'm going through here, and let's say that I didn't know what precariously meant. So what I would do here is say, okay, imperceptibly, I think that makes sense. Irregularly, I know that's out. D, precariously, I'm just going to keep it. And now I'm going to be down to those two. And notice that I'm not in terrible shape here. So I have a really good indication that this is correct. I have no idea what this means. I'm going to pick B. Be really conservative. Don't eliminate a word just because you don't know it. What if we were in the opposite world where B was wrong and you're left with something that you don't understand? Great. Congratulations. If you can eliminate 4 answer choices, even if you don't know what the 5th means, you win. So be really conservative on your first pass through. Cross it out if you know that it's wrong. You know why it's wrong. Keep it if you don't know the word. Obviously, keep it if you think it's a contender. Are you going to find yourself in situations where you're struggling, you're down to 2, you're down to 3, maybe you don't know any of those words? Sure, it's going to happen. I want you to embrace that pain as a GRE test taker. Adaptive test, you're almost certainly going to find yourself in that position at least a few times. And I just want you to be really clean about your process elimination. You know an answer is wrong, cross it out. You don't know that it's wrong, or you think it's right, or you have no idea what it says, just keep it. After you do your first pass through, see what you got. If you're in a situation like this, we know that B's right. Are you going to have to guess sometimes? Sure. But what you're trying to do is maximize the odds that you'll get it right. I'd rather have, if for example, I don't know B or D in this scenario, well, it's a 50-50 shot. That's going to add up to something over time. That's better than picking something that you know is wrong just because you know the word. So be conservative, cross out the ones you know are wrong, keep the ones if you don't know the word. If you do that over time, you're going to maximize your odds of getting a few more of these right. You're going to increase your probabilities. Now, the natural question that comes from there, should you study vocabulary? So I said this earlier in the video, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, 171,000 words in the English language. Any of those are fair game for the GRE. There's all these GRE vocabulary lists out there. Basically, it's test prep companies going through tests, going through official guides and saying, all right, what words show up? Let's make a list of those. Let's make some flashcards. Let's make an app, and that's great. But on your actual exam, you could see any of those 171,000 words in theory. So here's my take on it, is that studying vocabulary is something that takes a lot of time. Can it help you? Sure. But you have to believe a lot of things are true. You have to believe that the words you study happen to show up. You have to believe that memorizing words that way is actually going to get them to stick in your head. And education research says that for most people, that doesn't work super well. And then you actually have to understand it in context. You might be able to memorize a definition, but can you really use it flexibly when we're looking at a sentence? Maybe, maybe not. My point is that for most people, memorizing vocabulary is something that doesn't have a great return on your time. So if you're studying for the GRE in the short run, or if you don't need a score that's super, super high relative to where you stand right now, I don't recommend spending your time studying vocabulary. Now, if you think you're going to be studying for the GRE for a long time, go for it. Go ahead and spend time studying the vocabulary. That's okay. If you have time that you wouldn't spend doing something else, let's say you have a commute by public transportation, sure, you could sit there with a vocabulary app of some sort, and that's time better spent than just standing there doing nothing, I suppose. But don't make the mistake of thinking that the most important thing is memorizing a ton of vocabulary words. It's only going to help you make incremental improvements. Those improvements are going to come slowly from improving your vocabulary. Instead, what I really strongly recommend is be super disciplined about thinking about the sentence first. The instinct is bash through these answer choices super fast. Please, please don't do that. Take your time, take a breath, process what's going on in the sentence itself first. Think. Use your human brain. Think really carefully about what happens in the blank. How does it relate to something else in the sentence? And then just be disciplined with your process elimination. If you do that, wherever your vocabulary is, you're going to optimize your performance relative to that vocabulary. That's something you can improve pretty quickly in a couple of weeks of practice. Vocabulary is something you're going to improve over months, maybe even years. So again, not necessarily a bad thing to study vocabulary, but don't think of it as a magic bullet. It's a really, really, really slow way to improve. Okay, last thing I want to talk about before we get to our final example in the video. Which practice materials should you use? We're going to put some links in the video description to the official guides for the GRE. Obviously, those are going to be your best resource. I really do not recommend using non-official verbal questions at all for the GRE. Use the official stuff. Now, there's not a ton of it. You have the official verbal guide. You have the big official guide. There's not a ton of text completion and sentence equivalent questions in there. One really important tip, there are older official guides for the GRE. The test was overhauled more than a decade ago. You can pick up some out-of-print books. We'll put those in the video description. They have text completion. The format's a little bit different, but the fundamental skills are the same. So if you need more practice than you'll find in the current editions of the GRE official guide and verbal guide, feel free to pick up those older editions. You might be able to find PDFs online. You can certainly buy them on Amazon or whatever, buy used copies. Strongly recommend those as supplemental materials if you want extra reps on text completion. All right. With that, let's hit one more last question here. 2 blanks this time, a little bit more complicated. We'll give you a minute or two. As always, hit the pause button if you need a little more time on this one. Okay. So 2 blanks here. Start with the obvious point that you are more than welcome to start absolutely anywhere when you have 2 blanks or 3 blanks on text completion, whichever one you find easier based on the context. Now, what I don't want you to do, as always, don't jump right into those answer choices. That's what's going to get you into trouble. That's what's going to cause you to underperform relative to whatever your vocabulary level is. Okay, vain and prone to violence. Caravaggio could not handle success. The more his blank as an artist increased, the more blank his life became. As always, we're trying to look for something we can grab hold of, something meaty in that sentence itself, so we can say, okay, this thing's going to relate to this blank in some way. You're looking for something in the sentence that gives you a hint about the role that these blanks play. So what do we know about Caravaggio? Well, we know that he's vain and prone to violence, and we know that he can't handle success. So the more his blank as an artist increased, my assumption here that this is going to be something to do with a success, maybe not a direct synonym, but the more that he was successful as an artist, what happened to him? Well, he's vain and prone to violence. So the more, I mean, I guess you could kind of say vain and violent his life became in some sense, or behavior that relates to vanity and violence. Vanity, it's got a little bit of an ego or a lot of an ego. Violent guy. So the more his success increased as an artist, or again, something related to success, the more crazy, vain, violent, unstable, unpleasant, unhappy, something like that his life became. This is going to have to echo back to the vanity and his proneness to violence. And this is going to have something to do with success. Only thing that could possibly make sense here. Now, again, notice that I'm trying, not fully succeeding, in kind of keeping my thoughts here fairly broad. I'm looking for the thing in the sentence that is going to relate to that blank. I'm trying not to assume a single word. I'm trying to think in terms of ideas. Again, what that blank relates to. I'm trying not to anchor to a single word because that's when you can get yourself into trouble. They're going to give you words that are a little bit different than what you expect typically. You want to make sure you're keeping an open mind. And again, most important thing, take a breath. The more time within reason you spend digesting the context of the sentence, the less time typically you're going to need to spend on these answer choices. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start with blank number 1 here, just because I feel pretty clear about what's going on in each of the blanks. But again, if for some reason when you're looking at a question like this, if you feel clear about blank 2 first, no problem. Start there. Okay. Blank 1, A, temperance. So temperance means moderation or restraint. So the more his restraint or moderation as an artist became, that doesn't make any sense at all. We're talking about how successful he is as an artist and certainly not a restrained guy. So A is out. Notoriety. I think that sounds fantastic here. The more his notoriety as an artist increased, he was a successful artist. Notoriety means he was famous. Got to hang on to that one. That sounds fantastic. Now, what I see a lot of people doing right here is they go, yep, notoriety's great. Let's move on. We got it. The answer is B for blank 1. Don't do that. Always use your process of elimination. Don't fall in love with one just because B sounds pretty good. Doesn't mean you should ignore C or skim through C. Treat every answer choice equally. Sounds like a really obvious thing, but as soon as you get under time pressure, it's really hard to stick to that. So as you practice, be really disciplined. Look at each answer choice in isolation. Keep an open mind about it. All right, C, eminence. Well, what does that mean? It means greatness, successful, right? If you're an eminent doctor, it means you're a successful doctor. So that works as well. So now we have both B and C here. And when you're in that situation and they're both words that you actually know, take a moment and go, well, wait a minute. Again, what can I point to in the sentence that's going to relate to that blank? We're not talking about fame. We're talking about success here. So Caravaggio couldn't handle success. And the more his success as an artist increased, well, that's eminence. It is not necessarily notoriety. So his greatness or his success as an artist, it doesn't mean that he had notoriety. It doesn't mean that he was famous and people knew him necessarily. Are these things often related? Eminence or success and notoriety or fame? Sure they are, often. But what do we have in the sentence? Be literal. All we know is that he couldn't handle his success. Nothing about not handling his fame or even becoming famous at all. So B's not supported. Sounds good in the blank. Not supported at all by the context of the question. So B's out. We've got C for blank 1. All right, on to blank 2. So again, we're looking for something that's going to harken back to the vain and prone to violence bit. So the more, could we say that his life became more tumultuous? You bet. Lots of ups and downs. If you're vain and prone to violence, that's going to be a contender for us. Providential. Again, no shame at all if that's not a word you're familiar with. When we talk about providence, often it's divine. It might be luck. Divine blessing is often more likely. So the more his life was filled with divine blessings, that makes no sense. He's vain and prone to violence. So E is out, not supported at all by the sentence. Dispassionate, certainly not. If you're vain, prone to violence, and an artist, you probably are pretty passionate for better or worse. So F makes no sense. And C and D are our answers here. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. So again, I know it's not super sexy to talk about spending more time on the sentence itself and talking about context. But I can promise you, if you really give yourself the time on every question and say, I'm going to really laser focus on the sentence itself, really give yourself a few extra seconds to think about what do I know in the sentence that's going to help me out with those blanks. If you do that, and as you start practicing this stuff, if you do that with discipline on the next 20 30, 50 questions you do, you're going to be in absolutely great shape. Don't fall in love with answer choices. Don't discard things just because you don't know what it means. Could well be your answer. If, for example, I recognize that temperance is wrong, notoriety is wrong, I don't need to know what this means, and I'm going to get it right. So be disciplined, be systematic. Don't panic when you don't know the words. Almost doesn't matter who you are. You're going to see words on the GRE that make your head spin. That's totally natural. The question is, can you be disciplined about saying, I'm going to maximize my chances, be really good with my cross-elimination, be great with the time I spend on the sentence itself. If you can do that, no matter how hard the test feels, no matter how hard the questions feel, you're going to perform at the top of your abilities. All right, that's it for today. If you like this video, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'll have more for you in the sentence equivalence video. Thank you so much for watching.